Hello and welcome to another episode of the Parenting Teens podcast. Today we are going to talk about rebuilding trust with your teens. And you may think you may not have lost their trust, but hear this through, please hear me through, and we will cover some topics that will help you understand why this is so important. And I really should get rid of my phone before the podcast. So welcome to another live episode. My name is Kay Reeve. I am an emotional awareness expert, and that comes from the back of helping my son through many years of suicidal depression with autistic spectrum disorder. And that resulted in some very drastic moments for us and some major lessons learned. And over the years, I've developed strategies that not only help save his life many years ago now, but strategies that can help others. This is my way of paying it forward. So, rebuilding trust. I think before we talk about that, one of the first things to look at is some very simple ways in which it can be very easy to lose trust with a teenager, very often without even realizing you are doing it. So one of the first things might be where we need to really begin with our listening skills is when they come up and say, I need to talk, or have you got a moment for a chat? And we start by going, oh yeah, I'm busy right now. Or I'll speak to you when I get back from the shopping or when I get back from work, right? And that dismissiveness, if we're not careful, can lose trust. Secondly, when we are watching television with them as a family and something comes on that perhaps goes against your principles or values, or it's something comical and you make a judgment about it, or you're out somewhere and you make a judgment about someone else, somebody in the street or at the shops, and even in family conversation around the dinner table or with a partner or another sibling, making judgment about other family members or judgments to your teenager about their teachers or friends at school, all of this, from their point of view, can actually look untrustworthy in the way you make judgments on other people. And it's not intentional. I'm never passing blame here. It's not intentional, but they're things to be aware of. They might think, well, if you say that about other people, what do you say about me? And in their mind, they process it differently to how you feel. So saying, oh yeah, my teenagers can trust me, they can talk to me, is looking at it from your perspective. Excuse me. But what we want to do today is take this conversation where we turn it around and look at it from their perspective in how you appear to them and how you can build that trust with them. So a third one might be, and I'm just gone blank, a third one be is yes, it's not about you. So again, the responses and the reactivity that you have to things they say. So it's one thing to say, yes, you can open up and talk to me, but the other one is when they have that conversation with you, it's not about you, it is about them. And when they speak to you with or want to speak to you, but they have this expectation and this kind of role played conversation ahead of time. We all know what it's like when you rehearse how a conversation's going to go, like asking a manager for a raise. And for a teenager, approaching you about any topic can be very much that same feeling, where they're expecting certain responses from you about how you feel, when really it's about them and how they feel, why they want to talk to you. So that is some ways that can be very, very easy to unknowingly or unwittingly lose trust with a teenager. So now let's have a look and see how we can rebuild that trust, because having been there and done that, believe me, it is possible to turn this around and actually have your teenager engaging in conversations every time. But it is going to take time. That is the first value that I will put on this for you is time. Time is a value, the time that they take to build up the courage to ask you to speak to them. The time that you may not have available right now, But how you manage that moment without being reactive and dismissive while being able to obtain an opportunity, continue that conversation with them a bit further down the line. Excuse me. And time when you do actually spend time with them about making that about them and their problems. So, first of all, when they approach you and say, "Can I have a talk?" or "I need to say something," right, is wanting to just say, "Yes, let's go and sit down, let's have a chat, and I'm all ears, you know." But when you are in the middle of dinner or you're about to go out the door, instead of being dismissive and go, "Look, I haven't got time right now," or "I'm going shopping, we'll talk when we get back," or "I'll speak to you when I get home from work," instead of being dismissive, first of all, we want to kick in those listening skills. What was their tone of voice like? Right? What words did they use? Is it their normal way of just saying, "Oh, I've got something to tell you," and it's gossipy about something happened at school? Or is this something troubling them? And if you can spare even a minute, maybe two, and nobody's going to complain at you for being 60 seconds later than you are now. 60 seconds is very little. But just gauging, is this something that we really need to talk about now, or can we have this conversation when I get home? And by doing that, instead of dismissing them, you're asking their permission. It's a small, simple change, but the result that comes back from that in the trust between you and your teenager is massive. That they're now being asked permission to delay the conversation rather than being dismissed and ignored and told it will happen later, and then probably doesn't because they think you're too busy to come back and talk to you. So that's the first hint for me, or the first tip, is to, instead of dismissing, ask permission to delay the conversation and actually set the intention of doing exactly that at the time you've said. Well, what about at this time? I'll make 10, 15 minutes there, whatever, and actually have that conversation with them then, right? If you really have to go somewhere and you have to be somewhere on time for a meeting, for example, what you could say is, "Well, look, is it okay if I go and get to my meeting so I'm not late, but as soon as I'm out of the meeting, I'll give you a call and we'll talk on the phone?" That might be another way around it. That was a way that certainly used to help me with my son when I had to be at certain places with work on time. But at least he'd then gone from whatever was troubling him and being this absolute cliffhanger of a moment, rather than dismissing him, leaving him in this emotional dysregulation as he often was in, where his head was whirling and he just didn't know what to do and he was angry. And so it would be a case of, okay, take a breath, calm down. Look, I am really busy right now, but can we have this conversation at this time and I will phone you, right? And by doing that, he'd got, even if it was an hour or 2 hours, he'd got that time for that conversation to look forward to, rather than being left feeling like he'd hit a brick wall. And sometimes that was all it needed, was to keep him holding on that little bit longer, especially when he was often in an extremely emotionally overwhelming state, or sometimes even suicidal. Then there were some times when I had to put him before meetings and actually change priorities around and shift things. But the main thing is, to start with, was using those listening skills for an extra 60 seconds to assess whether or not that conversation needed to be had right now, or whether he had permission for me to delay it and an intention for me to follow it up at a set time. And it's a fantastic way for, say again, just building that trust, the same as you would if you were in business with a customer. "Look, I'm with another client right now, but can I speak to you at this time?" And you straight away move forward to set in place the next opportunity. And when you treat your teenagers with this level of respect, you regain their trust. And it's such a simple shift, but with a massive impact on the trust you have between you. So that's my first one today. The next one to talk about is judgment. Now, judgment is something we all do, right? We all say you shouldn't judge, but everybody makes judgment. You made a judgment about whether or not you should watch this podcast. And if you have, I'm so grateful you did. And I really hope this is going to help you. But we make judgments about all kinds of people and situations for different reasons. We make judgments about other people's cars, about football teams and who they follow. We make judgments about people's clothes and hair. The only thing is a lot of people take judgments as a compliment if it's a positive judgment, but they take it as negative and, oh, you shouldn't be judged or shouldn't judge people if it's negative. So it's a very fine line between a judgment and a compliment, but it's very easy for the negative versions of a compliment, a judgment, to be taken the wrong way. Now, why is this important when talking to teenagers? Teenagers have a lot of sensitive topics that they transition throughout their teen years, whether it is going through the hormonal changes and all of the different aspects of puberty, male or female, whether it is the whole point of going through crushes and relationships, dealing with friendships and social situations at school, whether it is bullying, whether they have problems with their homework and all their exam topics and conversations that they need to have with teachers. There is so many things that they could want to talk to you about when they say, I need a word. And so it's how to not create that negative judgment that makes them think you're going to do the same to them. And this goes on through all of the topics right through into adult life. And one of those that's actually one that came to me from somebody I spoke to a couple of years back was about gender and about all of the gender types. Now, there are a lot of parents out there who are in perfectly normal relationships and some who really don't believe in all the gender differences. So what happens if your child has a gender difference? The other one might be, what if you've been making comments about teenage girls getting pregnant or about people getting raped or abused? What if you've made comments, and this could be at the television, at the radio, they could have overheard you having a conversation with a friend or your partner, somebody on the phone, they could have overheard a conversation on the phone. But when somewhere in your life, not even at your teenager, you've had a conversation somewhere where you've made judgment about anybody for any reason, right? If your teenager in the background is secretly going through exactly that problem, and they've heard you make that judgment on the phone to your mate, or, you know, having a coffee with your best friend, or they've heard you talking to your parents or other family members about it, right? They're now going to be afraid to come and talk to you about that topic. And so that is why, for me, judgment is a really important topic to broach, in that is being careful how we end the judgment. Now, watching the television, there's some comedy program or maybe a news clip, and you want to make a judgment in conversation. It might be, okay, I disagree with that. And you, however you word that, I'm not going to go through all the different strengths in which ways in which people can share opinions and judgments, because there's hundreds of ways you could say it. But the essence of it is, yeah, I disagree with that. That's a load of BS. And you kind of end the judgment there. That's, again, very much like the dismissing your child in can I have a word. Judgment wise, this is dismissing that challenge, whatever that challenge is, as something that you don't want to broach or talk about. And therefore, they won't come and talk to you when they need to. But what if the simple change, again, that could happen is that you start to be more aware of what you say as a parent to the telly, in conversations, to a partner, when you're on the phone. And it's just thinking, okay, yeah, I disagree with that, but I would like to think, and you'd add this little piece on the end, I would like to think if that was my kids, they could still come and talk to me, right? So I might disagree with something to do with the sexual behavior, for example. I might disagree with the way my teenagers progressed into sexual behaviour, but I would like to think if there's a problem, they could still come and talk to me. So when you've made a judgment and you reflect briefly and then add that on the end, now if they've overheard you, you're still adding that element of trust on the end that you have your beliefs, but it's kind of telling them that your beliefs would still allow you to have that conversation with them and not allow your beliefs to override theirs. And it's a simple change. It might be something that you feel is a little bit difficult to embrace, but with practice, it can happen. Or it might be that something you totally disagree with and you put your foot down on it. I understand. But if you do that, then bear in mind, if your child or teenager is going through something different, it can still raise those barriers. Now, I know definitely this is something that comes up a lot when we talk about fathers and parenting from a male point of view, how they can very often say, no, I disagree with that, and they put the foot down and a very firm stance on things. That is basically the same thing. I have my view, I'm sticking by it. This is what I say, you're not going to do that, right? That basically, if you have that very alpha male type or alpha personality type stamp on what is right and wrong, that can be very much the same thing. So bear in mind, if it's who you are, it's who you are, but it will potentially drive a wedge between you and your teenagers. So it's how to just soften that a little without letting go of your own personal beliefs and views, but being able to accept, and this is the part that for me is really important, being able to accept that you don't have to let go of your own views and beliefs to accept that your children's views and beliefs may be different. They are not you and you are not them. They are your children, your teenagers, absolutely. They are your family and they always will be. But it's one of the hardest things to recognize is that sometimes children grow up to actually want or need different values and perspectives on life than we have as their parents. And it's how to find that balance in the relationship where they can still trust you, you can still build trust with them to do the right things, right? The right things for their perspective on life, not your perspective. And that can be a very difficult one for a lot of parents grow up thinking, well, I missed out on this and I didn't have that and my parents didn't do that for me and I didn't get those things and therefore I'm going to give all that to my children, right? By doing that, what we're actually doing is projecting your own deficits onto your child rather than dealing with your own healing. So if you're saying, oh, I didn't get a chance to be a doctor and I wanted to, therefore I'm going to make sure my child does. My teenager grows up to become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, right? That might not actually be what they want, and it might not be their perspective on life, but they're doing it because they're too afraid to say differently to you because of your alpha male stamp on things and your personality where you judge and judge other people by their jobs and roles. Well, that person's useless, they haven't got a proper job kind of thing, and therefore they feel like if they wanted to do that job, because it might be something they're creative about and actually like the idea of that, again, that can just create that sense of mistrust if you're not careful. So many areas in life where this can happen: fashion and clothing and hairstyles and jewelry and tattoos and what age they get married and what car they drive for the first car. And very often the dad has a big say in what their first car is rather than helping them choose the right option for them. And there's so many areas, but I'm going to stop there on the judgment bit because at the end of the day, it is natural to want the best for our children. It's just going about it in the right way that we want to be able to do it where there is a sense of trust, where they can think, okay, I need to know this. I need to choose a car. I want to talk about a different career option. Oops, I've got pregnant and I need to talk to mum about it. Or maybe they have actually been abused and want to be able to have that conversation, right? And it could even be boys as well that have had issues with girlfriends who have been abusive back and they want to have a chat with the dad. Be open to the fact that that all starts from very young, right? All that manipulation and control in relationships can start from the very first one because of insecurities from the other partner in the relationship. So there is so many ways in which we need to have these listening ears going and really be open that when we're talking about all the sensitivities they go through, being open to just how many different types of conversation your teenager could come to you with, right? How many topics might you have to suddenly approach that you hadn't been prepared for? But when you go through these teenage years being aware of all the pitfalls that they could go through and the conversations you may need to have with them when they are ready for them, then it helps you to do this with the right approach for building that trust. So giving it time as well. It might be that they want to talk, but then they're still insecure about it. And so to start with, they may not open up about everything. Again, give it time. Again, there's such a difference between, right, you wanted to say something, come on, tell me what it was. Or, okay, when you're ready, I'm listening. And if you don't want to tell me today, we can try again later. Right? You see that it's a subtle shift in terms of how we put it across. But sitting there and saying, come on, I'm here now. You wanted my time. What do you want? Is not going to actually build trust. That is going to put up barriers instead, because now they're suddenly reeling back from this overpowering energy. If I come forward with that and reeling back from that, they're not going to open up with whatever is bothering them. So again, coming back right now to the next bit I said about not about you. This is also a really, really important part about rebuilding that trust. When a teenager tells us, okay, I have a problem, I want to talk about this, it's very easy to go back, well, when I was a teenager, we had this, we had that happened, I went through this, right? This conversation is not about you. It's not about what you went through. It's not about your teen years. This is about them now and their topic. Now, I get it. Sometimes you think comparing those stories might inspire them. But if that's something you went through in the past, they've probably already heard it, and it's not the information they need today. So listen to what their challenge is, right? And the second part of this I want to say is it's not about resolving their problem for them. And that is one of the biggest pitfalls of having a conversation with a teenager when they have problems, is wanting to protect your teenager and solve their problems for them. Now, this moment, I do want you to reflect back on a time where maybe you wanted to talk to somebody as a teenager or as an adult, and you needed to bounce some thought processes off of somebody. It might be something you do regularly. I know I do. And when you bounce problems off somebody, even off your partner, right? Do you actually want them to resolve all of your problems, or do you just want them to listen and help you process whatever it is you're going through so that you can help them, that person, to find their own answers and their own way forward? And a good example of this might be children who are being bullied in school, or teenagers with lots of peer pressure. Okay, Mum, I want to talk. This is happening at school. And the first thing might be, right, that's it. I'm phoning the teachers. I'm sorting this out. And that might be that knee-jerk reaction, is to step in and want to go and resolve it for them. And I know I've had those conversations when my children were in school. And sometimes it was a case of, yes, Mum, I want you to ring the school. Sometimes. But I only ever did it with their permission. Right? Because it's them that has to go back to school and deal with the same people and the same teachers. Right? So again, actually having permission from your child sounds like a bit of a reverse role, but it's not like parenting permission to, like, yes, you can go out to a party kind of thing, or yes, you can go away on that school trip. It's not that kind of permission. again, it's about having that trust so that they trust when they come to you with a problem that, first of all, you listen. Secondly, you don't make judgment. Well, what did you do to deserve that this time or something? We don't want these kind of judgments coming out. We want to literally listen. Okay, so this has happened. Okay, do you know why it's happened? Right? Or is there anything more you can tell me? Again, you're just tapping into the listening and the curiosity. And it's about getting more answers from them, not making it about you. And I mean that in the kindest and gentlest way. About this is not about you. This is actually, it is about you. Let's make this all about you. It's about you gaining trust with your teenager. So, okay, this happened. I get it. Let's ask, do you know why it happened or what triggered it? Right. So instead of you jumping to conclusions, you're asking them what triggered it. Right. Getting more details. Okay, and if there's more questions come up, ask them gently. So it's about keeping that thought process and conversation going. And then you go, okay, so what would you like to do about this? That is the most important question of all. So instead of going, that's it, I'm ringing the school, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, ask your team, what would you like to do about this? Right? And if it's them saying, well, I would like to know how to have a conversation with them, or they might say, I would like to know what to say to the teachers, or they might say, I would like to know how to handle it if it happens again. So it might be about then shifting into what I call the mentoring role. So this is where you shift from parenting to mentoring. And it's like giving them a scenario. If this happens, next time it happens, try approaching it with different words, with different actions. So it might be walking away, it might be saying a certain thing, or it might be that you do need to go and speak with a teacher, but for giving them that possibility of doing that themselves first. And this mentoring role is actually then, instead of you taking over whatever their challenges are, it's empowering them with the skills to manage it themselves. And that is really important for your teenager in building life skills and resilience. So if you can actually get through that conversation in that way first, that is amazing. And giving them that opportunity to try again and again until they learn the social skills to manage the negative as well as the positives. There may come a time, however, when they do say, look, I really am too scared. I don't want to do this. I need your help. Can you go to the school and talk to them for me? Now, this could also be when we're talking about going to jobs, because you don't want to take that same mentality into the workplace where that's it, I'm ringing your boss up and having a word with them. So school is a good place to start working through that process early on, where they learn to manage their own expectations, to manage their own disappointments, learn to manage their own social difficulties. And so, yes, absolutely, having that listening skill, the non-judgmental conversation, right? And giving them that safe space to have that conversation. If you haven't got that time right in the moment, setting the intention to have that conversation with their permission to delay it to a agreed time, right? These are all interpersonal skills that we should use with each other as adults every single day anyway. But using them with your teenager is not only rebuilding that trust with your teenager, oh, and the staying calm as well. That's another really important one. So by doing all of this, it takes away those knee-jerk reactions, and by focusing on these strategies, it helps you to stay calm. So it's a benefit to you too in not having your own overreaction and your own emotional outbursts in response to whatever they want to talk about. And so I say again, just keeping it all about them, keeping calm, listening skills, non-judgmental, That way, you are going to rebuild a tremendous amount of trust with your teenager going forward. Now, that not only benefits them and benefits you as a parent, right? But you are paying forward skills that you are learning without even having to teach them what the skills are individually, because they will naturally learn that from you. So if you haven't had that from your parents, I'm really sorry if you've been through something extremely different and extremely difficult. I have a friend who has a book all about critical parenting reframed, if that is the case, and you've had a lot of that negative talk and that judgment and criticism from your parents, and you are now finding yourself paying that forward instead. There are ways to work through that and reframe that and work on your own personal growth too. But when it comes to the teenagers themselves, I also have my book here, Brain Unchained, which is all about raising emotional awareness for teenagers and young adults. A copy of that is available on Amazon. So next week, I have forgotten what I was going to talk about next week. Come back and have a surprise. I think it was something about circle of influence. We're going to go for circle of influence next week. That is a really important one with teenagers, especially with all the social skills at school and positivity and negativity with friendships and encounters. So what we're going to do next week is take that whole conversation about talking with your teenagers and take that onto circle of influence and how they can use these conversations to improve their social life, their mentoring skills that they receive from a number of other people. And let's build a much greater life for you as a parent and your teen as a teenager with parenting skills and parenting teens. That is small changes that make massive differences. If you've found anything useful in this at all today, I apologize that I've had a bit of a chest infection, so I'm a bit coughy today. But I really want you to say if there's anything in this that you found helpful, please drop a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to be informed when I go live every Tuesday, I haven't got a set time at the moment because it has to fit around my other schedules, but live every Tuesday and you'll get a notification when I go online. And if you want to join me on Facebook, I'll put a link to my private group. It's not private, sorry, to my public group on Facebook. And also, as I mentioned, my other friend with Self-Help for Adults with the Critical Parenting Reframed, I'll put a link to the Self-Help Bookshelf group where you can also contact her. But thank you for watching and listening in today. Let me know if you've caught up on replay, and I'll see you again next Tuesday where we'll talk about the circle of influence. Bye bye.